Today's episode of Heat Check is brought to you by Belvedere, part of a 600-year Polish vodka-making tradition. Belvedere vodka is all natural and made with 100% non-GMO Polska rye and pristine water. Belvedere has championed Polska rye vodka and superior natural ingredients since its inception and continues their mission with its new Belvedere Single Estate Rye Series. These award-winning vodkas, Smogory Forest and Lake Bartizak, are two distinct tasting vodkas born from unique terroir and expert craftsmanship. The expert craftsmanship, just like the Splash Brothers pulling out Game 5 to force a Game 6. Taste the difference and enjoy Belvedere's new Single Estate Rye vodkas on the rocks or in a delicious cocktail today. Belvedere is a quality choice. Drinking responsibly is too. And now, Heat Check.
He's got smoke coming off his fingertips. He's as hot as a blowtorch.
It's a heat check. You knew that was coming. It's heat check time.
Welcome to another special playoff NBA Finals edition of Heat Check. I'm your host, John Gonzalez. Isaac Lee, our producer, and is in LA. And coming off the bench for some much-needed minutes, we haven't had him here in a while. Chris Ryan is here.
I'm the Quinn Cook of Heat Check.
Much better return for you than, you're much bigger than that, much better return for you, sadly, than Kevin Durant, who returns for Game 5. He looked really good, Chris. It looked like they were going to get a ton of minutes out of him. He was scoring efficiently. I didn't think that the Raptors had much of an answer for him. And then all of a sudden he went down and he was clutching his leg. And according to Ramona Shelburne and other reporters, he left the arena on crutches and also in a walking boot. And this is, I think, like Warriors fans or Raptors fans or just basketball fans everywhere, pretty devastating blow.
Yeah, Ann Killian, a beat writer over at the San Francisco Chronicle, said Kerr, after the game, described it as an incredible win and a horrible loss. You know, we don't really want to speculate. It's Monday night. KD is supposed to get an MRI tomorrow. He had a walking boot. Unlike the last injury, they described it as a lower leg injury, whereas last time during the Rocket series when he first hurt himself, they described it as a calf injury. They were specific. Right. It was a calf injury. A lot of Twitter diagnosis going on out there. So I don't want to be reckless about it, but tonally, this felt different than the last time in terms of the way that it was sort of being treated back, in the locker room. Doris Burke said that basically like they were trying to give KD his space. A lot of indications that this was pretty significant injury. And obviously you're not only concerned for Kevin Durant as a person, as an athlete, but also it's just like you start to just really like wonder about what's going to happen to the NBA for the next couple of years, because so much of it was sort of, he was the fulcrum.
Yeah, I mean, we have like the Golden State Warriors who were in an elimination game, a closeout game for the Raptors, and the Warriors, win by 1. And like Kerr said, this should, like, it's a great win for them. This should be a feel-good moment for them. And yet, like, the main storyline coming out of this game wasn't, the Splash Brothers pulling it out when it looked like Kawhi was going to deal them yet another blow. It's, oh man, what's going on with KD when it looked like they finally got him back? He had been, there was a lot of heat and a lot of pressure for him to come back. And there was a lot of narratives about, if he didn't come back, what would that mean for the Warriors and what would that mean for him and his legacy? And is he going to just leave without playing in the finals? And then he does come back and he looks so good. And now all of a sudden we're talking about them not having him. And you're right to the ripple effects. I mean, not just for this series, but also for him and the team and the NBA writ large for who knows how long. And again, you're right. We don't want to speculate on what this injury could be, but this could have like long-lasting, league-wide ramifications.
Yeah, I mean, dude, this is just such a complicated one because obviously Durant was the subject of several pieces over the last couple of days that they didn't quite speculate that he was fit to play and choosing not to, but it was basically an example of the vacuum that gets filled when you have this many days in between games. So pieces get written, especially about a situation like this where, it could go either way. You could say like, hey, maybe he doesn't want to jeopardize his future, or maybe this or maybe that. And a lot of maybes turn into possiblies or allegedlys or reportedlys. And it just gets a little bit out of control. I'm going to do this in this situation, which is really naive and stupid, especially given the planet we're living on. But I'm just going to choose to give the benefit of the doubt to everybody involved. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt that the Warriors didn't put Kevin Durant in a bad situation, that the coaching staff, teammates, and front office didn't pressure him, and that Kevin Durant's an adult who made a decision that he was ready to play, and he looked ready to play. He looked great. He scored 11 points.
Did.
Perfect from behind the arc, perfect from the stripe, blocking shots, dancing before the game, hyped up, clearly a different Warriors team with him out there. Just such a shame. And you know what? When Ibaka dove for that ball, I think it was early in the second quarter, there was a loose ball that Ibaka dove for, and he cut KD's legs out from under him. And I was kind of like, man, this is tough because like people are going to be sitting on the edge of their seats watching this every single time KD hits the deck. But he looks good out there. He popped right back up. And it's just
really
such
did.
a heartbreaker to see him go out like that. The finals and the playoffs have been dictated by injuries for as long as I can remember watching basketball. I was talking earlier today with a couple of people in text, just being like, you think about like Kyrie and Kevin Love going out of the finals in 15, like other things, but none of them really had, I don't think, like the kind of almost tragic overtones of what happened with Durant. So it's just really, really, really sad to see.
It was. And, as you mentioned, he looked so good in the 12 minutes that he played. He scored 11 points. He was perfect from beyond the arc. It looked like, okay, all of a sudden, they were going to have a hard time with him. I mean, I think that the Raptors obviously and rightly were worried about him, so much so that they started Kawhi on him defensively, which is a big assignment when you need Kawhi at both ends of the floor and you're going to ask him to drain himself immediately by being on KD. And then, as Charks wrote on theringer.com, not having him on that Warriors team for the first 4 games of the series made his value apparent, right? Like they clearly, and I've made this point multiple times on Heat Check, it's crazy to say, but it's so true. They clearly needed his offense. Like the Golden State Warriors of all teams were short on offense, and he provided that for them, even if he couldn't, even if he had returned and not looked like himself, if he had just been like a spot up 3-point shooter who's, draining like 38% or something, you're like, I'll take that because we need offense. And then beyond that, for him just as a human being to come back amid all this speculation, amid all this pressure, and I'm with you. I think it's the right thing to do to just give everybody the benefit of the doubt here. It just sucks though, because, Kerr said with the whole Klay thing, and I think obviously not all injuries are created equal. These are very different situations. Klay, I think.
So John, we got Shams and Howard Beck. This is kind of happening as we're recording the podcast. We're getting reports. Bob Myers has said that it's an Achilles injury. They don't know the extent of it. I can't imagine there's like a silver lining here. Durant posted to Instagram, Dub Nation got to be loud as fuck for game 6. I'm hurting deep in the soul right now. I can't lie, but seeing my brothers get this win was like taking a shot at tequila. I got new life, LOL, #dubs.
Oh man. So we're learning about this, in real time. You guys will already obviously know all about all this when you're listening to it, but my reaction is that this sucks. It sucks for the series. It sucks for the Warriors. I don't have a dog in this fight. I just like basketball, and for all the reason that we were talking about before we found out the news that it isn't an Achilles injury, the ripple effects here are so significant. Like the Warriors are climbing back into the series, and then all of a sudden now they have to deal with, we're not going to have KD for the rest of this series, which has a blow on the court, but then just emotionally too, Chris, like when you were talking about they had to give him his space and Steph was really broken up, and Iguodala before the game had said, hey man, don't push it. Don't listen to all this news because it's not worth potentially hurting yourself. And I don't want to connect dots and say that the injury that he had, the calf injury, is the same as this. I don't think that it is, but just the idea that he did get back out there and then for this to happen is such a huge blow, because like Kerr was saying with Klay, when Klay got hurt and they held him out for game 3, I don't want to put him out there. He says he's fine, but I don't want to put him out there and have him get hurt because I would never forgive myself. And I just wonder what is going through all of their heads, emotionally and spiritually. And here's a guy who, sometimes hasn't always gotten along with all of those guys and vice versa, but clearly, they were in his camp and would be in his camp for something like this. And it just sucks, man.
Yeah, dude. I mean, according to Mark Stein, Tim Bontemps, all the people who were there at the game, it sounds like Myers is basically holding back tears. So yeah, it's just really, really a bummer. It's really, really sad. I can't confirm this because I haven't rewatched the beginning of the broadcast. But if I remember correctly, I thought in Countdown or at the beginning of the game, they reported that Steve Kerr had said he's ready to go. He's not in danger of doing an Achilles or, whatever. Like we think he's ready to go. He might not be at 100%, but it's not going to risk this major injury. And it's just so screwed up. Everybody thought during that first injury in Houston, it was all that speculation about it seemed like he felt like he got kicked in the back of the leg and that he had torn his Achilles then. And it was almost like this weird like rush of endorphins that he had just strained his calf or just gotten a calf injury. And it's been kind of mysterious as to like what's going on because he hasn't been able to practice with the team. Today was the first time he had been able to do so. God, man, I just feel so bad for that guy.
And this is something, Chris, we've had, seconds to digest this. Other people, as they're listening to this, will have had longer. But I just this is something that we're going to end up talking about in perpetuity for the foreseeable future. I mean, just the idea of man, just imagine what would have happened if he hadn't played and, would he have taken heat if they had lost this game, but he was healthy, but now he's not healthy. And did the Warriors medical staff screw up or, did they actually rush him back or did he rush himself back? But we thought he looked good because he was, he was, as you said, dancing and dunking before the game. And
man, you and I know that
good.
It could be all those things at the same time.
It's incredible.
It's like we try so hard to put these things into easy to define categories of this was a mistake. It's this person's fault. And maybe that is the case. Maybe we'll find out that is the case in this, but it's just you see Beck just tweeted that Bob Myers is fighting back tears. Quote, "I don't believe there's anybody to blame, but I understand this world. And if you have to, you can blame me. I run our basketball operations department."
I feel terrible for him and KD, everybody.
Yeah. It's just injuries happen in sports. And I think that as we watch them more and more communally in this way on Twitter together in this way, where we're constantly kind of ramping up the rhetoric around it, it's really interesting too, to think about it in relation to Kawhi too, because Kawhi was someone who very much, for as little as he says publicly, the rap on why Kawhi didn't go forward with the Spurs a season ago was that he didn't feel comfortable with the medical treatment, that he didn't feel comfortable with his relationship with San Antonio's medical treatment. And I hate talking about load management and injuries and rest in a game like this, but maybe, John, that kind of speaks to what a weird game it was after Durant left.
Super weird. I mean, the whole series has been weird, really. I mean, it's had a weird vibe to this entire thing where it was kind of hard to get a hold of what we were watching, save game one, where it was kind of the Raptors in a feel good situation where they were holding off the Warriors as the Warriors were trying to make runs, but couldn't pull it off. That was probably the most classic basketball game, just straight basketball game we've gotten yet. And everything else has just felt off by a factor, and up to and especially and including tonight with KD, where yeah, I mean, this is the massive story, not just of this game, but of this series, and we'll be moving forward. It's such a strange thing because there's other basketball on court things here that we need to discuss, and we will discuss. But and I almost feel dirty, even hinting at the ripple effects. But it's true. This is something now the Warriors have to just go back to. Okay, now how do we game plan for the Raptors?
Forget free agency. Let's talk about it like this. Let's try to even tease out emotionally what the Warriors must be going through right now, because this should be a celebration of what they're all about. They were able to somehow gut this out and shoot their way out of, I mean, have you ever had a game like this where so many times a team that was down 6 or 8 seemed to have had a dagger? The Raptors were losing and they would hit a shot and I was like, that's dagger. That's game. They're going to come back and get into and just eclipse them. And that's what I thought when Leonard went on his Jordan run in the fourth quarter. And even in the face of Boogie and Draymond making a couple of mistakes down the stretch, the Splash Brothers were able to shoot their way into this W. And now they're going to go back, and all we are going to talk about until Thursday is Durant and whether or not they made a mistake with their management of Durant.
The shooting was incredible by the Warriors. I mean, they shot almost 50% from 3, and the Splash Brothers, this is the first time that they splashed in the finals. And they needed every bit of that. And I felt exactly the same way as you did in the fourth quarter when I was watching that going, oh, right, this is the same as game 4 where, the Warriors are throwing everything at them that they could. And the Raptors, like, all of a sudden are going to go on a run and Kawhi's going to do Kawhi things. And there was a stretch there. I think Kawhi scored 12 of their final 16 points and he scored 10 straight at one point and he grabbed crazy offensive rebounds and put those back and hit running 26 footers and like little floaters in the lane. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. This is it. The Warriors are cooked and they won it. They pulled it out somehow. And yes. And like that, not just us, like, it's not just us that like where we're going to sit here for the next however many days and talk about like how do they move forward on the court without KD, but them too. Like this is going to consume them completely because that's their guy. I mean, that's their teammate, their coworker. They need him on the court, and then just emotionally and spiritually, that's got to be super draining to win this game. Exactly what Kerr said. Like it's a great win and just a devastating loss.
Yeah, I mean it's wild because it felt like a national championship game or a Champions League final, or it was like a game 7. It felt like something where even Chauncey Billups said before the game, I feel like this is a must win for the Raptors. I feel like that the Raptors, like they've built up, that people were camping out for game 5 in Canada, all over Canada. People were like at parks watching the game. It was as if they were building up to, this is where we end it. This is where we make a stand. And now I don't even like, I think it's just like millions of people are kind of like, what am I supposed to do with my hands? It's like all of basketball media is getting on a plane tomorrow to fly to Oakland with one question in their mind. What the hell just happened? Toronto's got to get their minds right and be like, yes, we may have blown our best chance to win this series, but we certainly didn't blow our total chance to win this series. And just because you blew a 3-1 lead as a meme doesn't mean that they're out of it. And the Warriors need to be like, we bought ourselves another day of life with or without Durant. So the amount of stuff that's going on just in the foreground, to say nothing of the background and what this means for free agency and what this means for the ongoing debate about how many games players play and how many minutes players play and what we do around those injuries or what NBA teams do around those injuries. It's just like a kaleidoscopic conversation.
All right, before we continue, let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. Today's episode of the Ringer NBA Show is brought to you by City on a Hill, the action-packed new drama series from Showtime, the same network that brought you Billions, Homeland, and Ray Donovan. Set in a volatile early 90s era Boston, when police corruption ran rampant through a system plagued by racism, City on a Hill stars award-winning actors Kevin Bacon and Aldous Hodge. The new series follows an upstanding district attorney played by Hodge who teams up with a corrupt FBI agent played by Bacon. The two form an unlikely alliance to take down a local crime family and clean up the city. Executive produced by Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, and Tom Fontana. To stream the first episode for free, go to sho.com/city. City on a Hill airs Sundays at 9 p.m. only on Showtime. And now, back to Heat Check. For the Warriors, where, like you think, okay, KD goes down and you're screwed. Like the odds, the in-game odds, because now, with betting, like everything changes instantly on the fly and you can bet things in game. Like before the game, the Raptors were plus 115 to win that game. And then as soon as KD went down, they posted a new one and the Raptors went up to minus 125. But then for the rest of the series, the Warriors were supposed to be 4-1 to win in game 6 and game 7. And that's going to change now too, because of KD. And like this whole thing, like this entire series has felt like it's never been one thing. Like I kept expecting at the beginning the Warriors to, because they kept saying over and over again, we're the Warriors and we have this muscle memory and it doesn't matter and we're going to figure it out. And as long as we play the way we play, we're going to get back in the series. And it didn't feel that way. It certainly didn't feel that way when it went to Toronto with the Raptors up 3-1. And then they get KD back and it feels like the momentum started to shift. And then they win this game. And now I don't know where the momentum is. Like if you're the Raptors, you don't want to go back to Oakland for all the reasons you just outlined. Like you have to get back on a plane and go back across the country to play against a team that just lost a guy that they really wanted to get back, that will be motivated to, win one for the Gipper type of thing. But also like, you've been the better team and you've got now still the best player in the series. So I have no idea where this goes, just like I have no idea where the rest of the series even started.
Yeah, and then you've got an Oracle that will probably be completely bonkers because they get a second life. Because they
now
get
the real last game ever in Oracle history.
This is officially the last game ever Oracle. They have the Splash Brothers Warriors. They have they're going to be playing for KD. I mean, what happens if KD shows up on the bench? You know what I mean? Like, what happens if he gets like a Nurkic moment where he walks out there and waves to the crowd? Like, are you telling me that the roof doesn't completely blow off that place? And to say nothing of the fact that, like, the Raptors have been, like, pretty much better than the Warriors in almost every quarter of this game. Like, I don't even know how to judge this last game yet. I haven't looked at, like, the math yet on that. But the Raptors can't be feeling that much worse about how they're playing against Golden State.
So they played 20 quarters of basketball. The Raptors have won 14 of those, and then 2 other quarters they've tied. So yeah, I'm with you. Like I think the Raptors have pretty plainly been the better team in this series, but like, I don't know how you quantify or grade on a curve whatever emotional boost or even potential like debit that the Warriors would have from this whole injury.
This is uncharted territory. I mean, like I said in the beginning, we've had injuries in the finals, Kyrie, Kevin Love. We've had significant injuries in the playoffs over the last 10 years. Tony Parker, the Thunder withstood like multiple injuries to Durant, Westbrook, and Ibaka in various years. Gosh, I mean, like every Clippers season was done in by a Paul or a Griffin injury, it seemed like. Shout out to you, Isaac. I mean, we've seen postseason injuries derail things before. We're kind of in uncharted territory because I've never seen a postseason injury that could then go on to maybe inspire a team to win the finals.
I mean, like, I don't want to be like too hyperbolic in the moment or too overreactionary, but like this could be one of the biggest injuries in NBA history, given what player got hurt and in what moment. Like, I'm with you. Like, it's hard to think of something that was like more important or massive and might have like more consequence than this one. It's just like, I couldn't believe it in the moment. I don't know that I'll believe it tomorrow or for the next couple days to come. And then like, even in just like in the game, in that moment, the ripple effects were immediate. You went from in that game, in that moment, basically, like I was slacking with Divine and I'm like, man, you know, before the injury, I'm like, man, do you think that Boogie catches a DNP CD tonight? And then KD goes down and he goes from not playing to you have to play him and bring him in. And he ends up having like one of his better nights in the finals against the Raptors because the Raptors bigs had basically cooked him all series long.
Yeah.
And he came in and he provided some offense, which they desperately needed. He scored 14 points in 20 minutes and he was still net minus in the in-game plus minus, but it was like one of
he
the
almost
better
threw the game away. He had a goaltending, an offensive goaltending, and a moving screen. I mean, like, it was just wild that somehow Golden State survived that and Draymond's backcourt down the stretch.
Yeah, the backcourt down the stretch. I mean, like, just so many things stemmed from that. I don't know. I don't imagine being Steve Kerr and Steph and Klay Thompson, and you're like, we got to get on the plane. We're still in it. Like, now what?
Yeah, now what is the biggest thing? Now what is there anything from this game that is actually real? Like, do you take anything from this game? Like, the only thing that really alarmed me down the stretch was the thing that I was a little bit worried about with Toronto, honestly, throughout the playoffs, was their shot making ability under tight circumstances. Was aside from Kawhi, is there a guy out there who they can rely on to get buckets, to get a bucket off the ball or with the ball in his hand? And I didn't see it from Siakam, and we didn't see it from Lowry down the stretch, and we didn't really get it from Gasol, who got kind of played off the court in spots during this game. So that's the only thing that's really unnerving. Otherwise, like, if you're Toronto, you just have to, like, to borrow a Phillyism, trust the process, because everything that they've done so far in the playoffs has worked out exactly right for them.
Yeah, I thought, like, you know, at the end, Lowry obviously got a clean look and it was not a good shot. But that's been sort of the story for the Raptors all postseason long, where, like, during the regular season, I thought, you know, their depth was one of their greatest attributes. And then in the postseason, it's kind of been, there were multiple moments, at least in the Sixers series, where I thought, like, you could see Siakam didn't want to take the shot.
Yeah,
Gasol
you just
didn't
wrote
want to
about
take
this.
the shot. Yeah, Lowry disappeared. And then in the finals, I would argue that has not been the case, that they've almost all taken turns. Like, we got that Siakam game in game one. Lowry had a pretty good game in the loss. Gasol has been clearly more willing to shoot, certainly beyond the first 2 series. And then since then, you know, like, he took only 6 shots tonight, but there have been plenty of other games where at least he didn't pass up the open shot, which is just a killer for spacing. And, like, you're going to make it much more difficult on your offense. But yes, tonight, it was once more, oh, it has to be Kawhi in this situation, because if it's not Kawhi, we're not going to win the game. And by the way, I thought it was Kawhi, and I thought they were going to win the game, and they still didn't.
We were literally got out the hammer and the chisel and started carving new Jordan into a piece of stone. I mean, those few shots he made down the fourth quarter stretch where you were like, oh, kind of a quiet Kawhi game. Kind of like he's in third gear. And then all of a sudden he hit the booster rockets. And just tonight, of all the times in the playoffs, pretty much, it wasn't enough.
Yeah, and I wrote about this for Winners and Losers, where I had him as a winner because, he goes and he scores that 10 straight and 12 of the final 16, and he has a double-double, 26 and 12. Boardman had 12 rebounds, and then he had 6 assists and 2 steals and 2 blocks. And yeah, you're right. It still wasn't enough, which I think, like, when you have had so many huge moments in the postseason and you have clearly been the best player in the postseason and you have willed your guys to win many games and through many series, even when you have a game like that, people will look at the line and go, oh yeah, still not enough. They needed more Kawhi because he went 9 for 24, which is crazy town.
It is so wild. I mean, I'm trying to imagine right now. I mean, John, you were covering the first 4 games of the series in person. What did you think the vibe was? I mean, it's impossible to extrapolate, but what do you think the vibe was around the Warriors? Like, do you feel like they're ready to get it going, like, even in the face of all this?
So I thought initially they put on a really good face, like after game 1 and 2 in Toronto, certainly after game 2, because they won that game. Even you could even argue after game 3, those first 2 losses, they did the whole, we're the champs and we've been here and we've done that. And the muscle memory is going to get us out of it. And, not to worry. And they definitely sold me on it to the point where I wrote about it. And then after they lost what could have been the last game in Oracle, they were flat out dejected. Like, Steph was like, this is not a good spot. I'm paraphrasing. And this is not a paraphrase from Draymond. Draymond was like, this sucks. It sucks a lot. I mean, like, I think they thought we're going to go and we're going to try to play our best game. And hopefully we get KD back, because there were some rumblings that he might be cleared at the time and they were hopeful. But
right.
they were for the first time since, I think, losing the 2016, blowing that 3-1 lead to the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think that was the first time that they were genuinely shook. Like, even against the Rockets last year, where the Rockets were up 3-2 and then went on and missed those 27 straight threes and Chris Paul got hurt and whatever. And it looked like the Warriors were in a really bad spot before that happened. I didn't think that the Warriors looked off their game or shook. They looked shook going back to Toronto. And now all of a sudden they steal this game, but also KD goes down. And I don't know how they should feel or what they feel, or like, it's probably what you said earlier, where it's probably all of these things at once.
Yeah, I'm just honestly like, this is a weird podcast to do, because I'm kind of like processing
Yes.
it in person. Like, yeah. I'm looking at Twitter as we're talking, and it sounds like Bob Myers is essentially crying during his press conference and talking about how important Kevin Durant is, how it was crazy that anyone ever questioned that he wanted to play. He's saying that the first injury was a calf injury and that this is an Achilles injury, and he doesn't think that the two are related. But, obviously people will be second guessing him about that. Man. I usually have like a harder heart when it comes to stuff like this. I think I usually
do you? I've always thought you were a pushover.
No, I can be sentimental and stuff, but I think that, like, I'm a little bit more like, injuries are a part of sports, and I just think that the emotional outpouring that happens for them is often a little bit overdone, but maybe not in this case. And it really, honestly, has nothing to do with his free agency. It really does have to do with just how screwed up the discourse was around him coming back. I don't know that it would have mattered one way or the other if nothing had been said about, like, well, maybe he's dogging it a little bit so that he doesn't, like, miss out on free agency. I mean, Kevin Durant can get as much money as he wants in free agency with one Achilles or no Achilleses. Like, I think any team would probably pony up to give him whatever he wants. And so will the Warriors probably. But it just feels so weird to be watching this in real time.
It really is. Like, I have a lot of thoughts in my head about the actual basketball in the game, but every time I go to, like, look at how the Raptors bench did, or like look at where the Warriors were able to steal minutes when they needed to, I keep thinking back about, and like, it almost feels callous to even entertain these ideas so soon after the injury. And like, we're still in the finals, but like, the ripple effects for the offseason and his free agency and like how these pieces were going to get moved around the board. I mean, Bakes just wrote a whole thing about how the Knicks, because of KD, have become sort of the center of the postseason, despite the fact that they're not in the postseason. And that is very much true. Like I have covered multiple rounds of the playoffs from the beginning with the Sixers and the Nets up through these finals. And invariably, wherever you go, the talk is, oh, KD's gone. Where's he going to go? And then it's, well, what would happen if he doesn't play in the finals? Like, would he maybe come back and entertain? Like, if the Warriors lose, would he maybe come back and stay with them on like another 1-1 or something like that? Would he reconsider? And everything has been filtered through this, pending free agency for KD. It's been such a hot topic for so long. And it almost feels perverse to be thinking about it in this moment, but it's also impossible to not.
It is. I mean, this whole postseason has been kind of positioned as a prelude to the offseason in a crazy way.
Yeah.
Everything from Jimmy Butler to Kawhi Leonard to Kevin Durant to could Anthony Davis get traded to another team that could then enter this elite group of teams? Where's Kyrie Irving going? What will Boston do in his absence? What will the Sixers do with their free agents? Like, everything is about questions about the future. And it's been a very strange playoffs. I think it's only had like a handful of signature games. It's had a couple of gentlemen's sweeps. It's had a couple of like, we get ourselves all up into a lather about something, and then Milwaukee loses 4-2. So it's nothing to really talk about. But,
Right.
this here kind of defies our constantly moving forward discourse about the NBA and asks us to tap the brakes and just kind of sit in it. And all you have to do is look at the quotes from the guys in the Warriors locker room. And also, even before this Durant thing, everybody on that Warriors team seems to be playing with something wrong with them. You know what I mean? Like Looney, Curry doesn't look always 100%. Thompson's obviously playing hurt. Boogie's playing hurt. It's just
Looney could barely even raise his arm up at some points during the game tonight, and he was taking some massive hits when he was, trying to grab rebounds and hitting the deck. And there was one where he went up for a rebound, and Lowry was sort of underneath him, and he just sort of like somersaulted onto the court. And I'm like the amount of pain that guy is playing through is incredible. And like, you're right, like they're all banged up, and they're in this situation now, and emotionally and physically, they have got to be absolutely drained.
Yeah, man. I mean, as weird as it feels to talk about all this stuff tonight, and we didn't really talk about like, did Lowry have a good game or a bad game? Did the Warriors figure something out with how to get Gasol off their backs a little bit? Like, how dependent are the Raptors on Siakam because the games that they're losing are the games that he's not having good games? There's a lot of tactical questions to be asked, but yeah, I mean, just even talking to you, like I kind of thought maybe we would talk about Durant for a few minutes and then talk about adjustments, but it's obviously going to take over this entire finals. And I'm sort of fascinated from a kind of guy at the aquarium way, like how are these guys going to respond to this? Like you're almost like watching this through the glass being like, hey, what happens when something really, really heartbreaking happens? Does it galvanize a team? Does it just defeat them? Do the Warriors have anything left in the chamber to come out in Game 6 and take it back to Toronto?
Everything from the finals adjustments for Game 6 and rotations and how they play to what happens after Game 6 to, his health to, free agency. Like I'm with you. When we first started this podcast, I'm like, all right, we have to talk KD off the top, and then we're going to move to basketball. And the more and more we discussed it, the more I think that everything that we talk about and write about and pot about for the, however long is going to be with our KD goggles on. And that's how significant this was. Like, I just can't believe it happened. It's unfortunate. We're going to have lots of content about this and the NBA Finals and KD and where we all go from here on theringer.com. So please check that out. And there'll be plenty more podcasts moving forward in your Ringer NBA show feed. So be on the lookout for those. We want to ask everybody to please rate and review us if you would be so kind. We also want to thank you for listening. For Isaac and Chris, I am Gonz. We will be back. See ya.